Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hi, welcome to this edition of State of Economy podcast on defense. Our today's guest is no stranger to defense industry. Mr. Rajinder Singh Bhatia is an army veteran and has 5 decades of experience and sizable of it as industry leader. He recently took over as the president of Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers, the apex interface between the industry and the government and globally as well. Ahead of the budget, we will have Mr. Bhatia's views on the industry expectation and how it is poised to deliver on services requirements for mainstay weapons and next generation systems besides government's push for exports. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Let me begin with a question. How does the government and services look at industry presently, as it has been more than 7 years since the defense acquisition procedure was amended in 2016 to initiate Atmanirbharta in military domain, and how this gets reflected in the SIDM approach? And before you answer, sir, let me congratulate you for becoming president of SIDM.
Dalip, thank you so much. I think it's a very important question. The government looks at industry becoming a very strong pillar in its effort to become a Atmanirbhar Bharat. No country can actually call itself truly independent if it is dependent upon other countries for its security needs. We cannot be an importer of security, and hence the line taken by the government of India to ensure that we become self-sufficient and also become a self-reliant nation is actually the theme moving forward. If you recall, and if you see, if you were to play a cricket match and half of your team was sitting outside, there is a very little chance that you will win that match. So when you want to achieve an aim which is like Atmanirbhar Bharat or a self-reliant nation, you cannot leave half your resources out and then say that I will be able to achieve that aim. By that, what I mean is that we need public sector undertakings, and we as much need the private industry to be there so that the complete optimal utilization of all the national resources is done to achieve that aim of a self-reliant country. So government looks at private industry with great expectations. And to be honest, I don't think we have let them down. In the last few years, we have taken rapid strides. You rightly said it is a criticality, or the real thrust came about 8 to 9 years ago. So according to you, about 7 to 8 years have passed. But you must recall that this business is like a marathon. A new project generally in today's time frame takes anything from 5 to 7 years to actually see fructification. So the timelines would be long, but the entry barriers are also high. So once you have stepped into it, I think industry will be there for good. So this is to answer the first part of your question. The second part is SIDM over the last few years. In fact, it is a nascent body, but it has donned the mantle of becoming the absolute voice of the defense industry. We represent almost 600 companies, and we are looking at taking this figure up to about 1,000 by the end of next year. And that would be a true reflection of the complete defense industrial base in the country. We strongly believe that if nation has to achieve its aim, then we need to have a situation where every constituent, be it in private sector or in public sector, pulls together to achieve the aim for which we have set it.
So what is your what is the SIDM immediate goal for 2024, if I can ask, sir?
See, there are a number of goals which are there, but 2-3 prominent ones I would like to highlight. First is that we need to have a more, I would say, focused organization for the exports. If I was to tell you that the total manufacturing in the country last year was 1,08,000 crores, out of which approximately 20% was in private industry and 79 to 80% was done by the defense public sector undertakings. But the interesting part is when you take a look at the export figures, the export last year was 16,000. This year it is tending to be going to be around 20,000 crores. Nearly 80% of that exports comes from private industry. So if you take a look, I think one of the focus areas for SIDM would be to setting up of a export promotion council, which is what we have been tasked by the Indian government. Also to get, organizations like Exim Bank on board, we need a separate desk for defense exports, and we need all the collaborative effort of both the state and the industry to realize the aim of $5 billion exports in the next 3 to 4 years. And this is not a tall figure. Today, we will be almost, hopefully, by next year, we should be touching about 3 billion. And if we are touching 3 billion, going up to 5 billion is very much possible in the next 3 to 4 years. So one of the focus areas would be that. The second focus area would be that there is always a scope for improvement. I think we have moved a long way from where we were, say, many years ago. We have a lot of transparency, we have a lot of interaction, there are a lot of policy changes which are done, but then you will realize that there's always scope for improvement. So we would like to take a look at, try to find whatever are the areas where we can make the policy framework more conducive for the Indian industry. The third and the foremost point would be on the startup ecosystem and the MSMEs. No country can afford to develop technology. In fact, if Dalip, you allow me, I'd like to expand a bit on it. A technology is in a three-segment process. There could be research and development, there could be innovation, and there could be breakthrough technology. Now, research and development, which is in fundamental research, would always remain a state subject. And organizations like maybe DRDO or industries or the large mega industries would be taking a look at it. Innovation happens at everywhere, but innovation is an incremental step. The real benefit of technology development comes from breakthrough technology. And word over it is seen that the breakthrough technologies actually come out of garages and startups. Now, we need to really nurture our startups to take it forward. That is why there's a big focus in SIDM to find ways to find funding for the startups and also to nurture them so that they can bring tomorrow's cutting edge technology to the fore. So these are some of the focus areas. I am only telling you about 2 or 3 points which are focused. There are many others which are part of our year's target and 2 years target. And hopefully over one of the next discussions, I'll be able to share all that with you.
So you have flagged a couple of issues in your response on startups, exports. But I would take up the startups issue slightly later in our conversation. I would like to get on to exports. So what we have been seeing is the foreign OEMs are interested in either having a tie-up, coming here, selling, making weapons and selling here. But we have not been able to get access to the US or European market because of the regulatory factors. I also know that government of India is trying to negotiate. But what is the prescription SIDM has? Because the industry, we have been talking to the industry. Industry also feels okay, fair enough. You say sign an MOU with UK, with France, with US, but unless until you get access to their market, if you can sell their product, you won't be able to cross that Lakshman Rekha. So your views on it?
Again, an excellent question. Let me first take a US market because that is a little more unique than rest of them. Now, US is by far the largest defense contractor, or the country which spends the maximum amount of money, is almost 40 to 45% of the global spend on defense. So there is no way that you want to become a major power in defense production and not be participant in US market. Now, US market actually plays in a very different manner. To get into the supply chain, there are various steps which we need to be taken. Now, one of them was that while we do have ISET and some other agreements with US government, but the criticality is our 2 agreements. One is called SOSA, which is supply on strategic materials and strategic components coming into United States. And second is DFARS, Now, DFARS, once you are a qualifying country under DFARS and you have signed SOSA, then all Indian companies can get into the supply chain of the US. Now, those are the critical steps. Those are part of our policy initiatives we are looking at. SOSA is almost about to be signed, but we also need to become participant in DFARS. Once India comes in there, a large number of Indian companies will be able to get into the supply chain. Now, coming down to the second point, which is on Europe, that is not fully correct. A large number of the companies in private sector are exporting goods to Europe. Although the market may not have broken very in a big manner, but a large number of, even from my own company, a number of items are being exported today to Europe. We are also looking at many other markets in addition to these. So European market would be easier to break because it does not need classically many more agreements, although you are aware about the UK, IBC and SIDM signing an agreement. But US market will be dependent upon our crossing the hurdle of signing DFARS and SOSA. So these are the answer as far as I am concerned for these two markets. Rest of the markets are open and available. And I think most of the Indian industry, either in public or private sector, is exploring those opportunities.
So let's expand this narrative slightly more and get on to the immediate neighbor. No, India does not appear to have a Southeast Asia strategy. I'm talking about military to counter China's influence. As we have a defined military approach towards West, can you explain? Because see, we are not able to sell the way we want to in Southeast Asia. We are not able to sell the way we want to in Africa. Why is it? So we offer a competitive price. Our systems quality wise also, I don't think are inferior. But where are the issues? Is it in terms of government's policy approach or what it is? Can you be precise on it?
Okay. There are two parts to your question. One is the tackling the security scenario, what you mentioned to start with, and then moved on to what needs facilitation to help us approach various markets. As far as our stand vis-a-vis various neighbors, how do we want to handle that security situation? It is out of our charter. I'm sure our armed forces, our bureaucracy, our political establishment is well equipped to handle that part. I would not be rightly commenting on that. Now, coming back to the second point as to whether we are able to exploit the market, any place where you start new, and we have actually started on this venture new. And let me share with you that just about 7 years ago, I was in one of the seminars without naming. We were very told we are a Gandhian nation, and this meant about 10 years. We are a Gandhian nation 11 years ago. We are a Gandhian nation. We do not want to export, the arms. The things have changed. We are starting to look at it in a different manner. Today, we are going all out. Not even 5 years ago, I could imagine that every delegation which comes from outside will visit us, the private industry. Today, you have interactions going on. You have DAs coming over. Before even they go for their job, they come to the private industry to find out what they can do for them. So we moved a long way. But have we reached our ultimate aim? Not yet. There will always be scope for going further. Now you asked me one question. Why is it that other people are able to exploit? Well, they probably started on this path earlier. What we need to do is, and that's exactly when you asked me what are the focus area, one of the most important focus areas which I mentioned was export promotion. And export promotion needs a seamless activity between MOD, MEA, and Ministry of Commerce. And you need a similar kind of lines of credit like people are doing. I'm sure government is quite alive to it. We have been told and given very positive feelings. And that's why some of the companies today have exports more than their domestic revenues. Even in our my own group, 70% of this year's revenue is coming from exports. So there is a sea change. If you see, we have gone 10 times in last 7 years in exports. But if you talk about at the global level, it's a drop in the ocean. We have to go a long distance. I am eternally positive, man. I believe we have covered a major amount of journey. Small little hiccups, small little hurdles will always be there. we need to overcome that. And I think we should be able to not only achieve the laid out targets, but probably surpass.
Another small question before we wind up this part of the conversation and move on. South Korea has been exporting and their products and their exports have gone phenomenally well. And I was the other day I was reading about them and how they have tweaked their policies to ensure that it is seamless and responsive to the market. Can you give a sense on South Korean story, defense manufacturing story?
See, rather than giving a sense on South Korean story, let's say if we can learn the lessons from what South Korea has done. But the critical part to this is, let's take a look. Did South Korea start 7 years ago? No, they started to develop their defense industry long time ago. As early as 15 to 20 years ago, I was a regular visitor to South Korea. I saw the industry. They were always in making all the engines in Korea. They were always developing. So the key to exports lies in the fact who owns the intellectual property. This is the key which we have been talking, that we need to evolve. We need to become custodians of intellectual property. Markets will open thereafter. Now there are two parts to the export story. The first part lies in the fact who owns the intellectual property. Do you have the technology ownership to probably market that equipment? The second part is that if you have the technology ownership, you need a framework which should be able to allow you to do. Now, coming back, first part to the technology ownership, what South Korea did, South Korea went with their champions. They created certain champion industries. They allowed them to operate. India is a very vibrant democracy. I am not sure we can follow the same path as South Korea and say one person only or one company will only make ships in the country. In a country like India, it becomes very, very difficult to try and earmark private industry to say you will only do this and others will only do that and this. And that's how the specialization actually came in Korea. Whether we can adopt that model in India, I will leave that as a question mark. But what we can learn from them is that we need to create technology in the country. Ownership of technology is what going to help you. Thereafter, if we are able to put our act together, India stands in a unique position as an emerging force, and I think a lot of markets will open. If you say there is a work in progress, I will totally agree with you, work in progress. But if you say not much has happened, I don't tend to agree because I think we have almost done 10-fold increase in our exports. And that is far more than what anybody anticipated any time in the recent past.
No, I was basically talking on the pace and the policy part of it, but let's get on to another question, sir. How is the Indian industry shaping up vis-a-vis our future requirements? And I think I would like to seek your opinion on the AMCA, which has been pending for long, and Air Force at various level has been flagging the need for 4.5 or fifth generation aircraft.
So answering this question is that if you take a look at segment wise, well, now in land systems, we may have reached a level of, self-sufficiency, which is very high, leaving aside the certain items which may be on the seeker side or on certain, items which are probably more oriented towards electro-optical detection. So there may be work required to be done. On marine, there are reasonable amount of progress. On the Air Force side, engines remains to be a big bugbear for us. And there is no doubt that we need to find a way to get rid of this. We strongly believe whenever we have been driven to the wall, whenever other options have not opened out, we have been able to achieve the aims which have been laid down for us. Take a look at what ISRO has achieved in sending a craft to now even to Sun for that matter, or sending it to Mars or sending it to Moon. All this was achieved because nobody else was there to give you this technology. So you created all this at home. Right now, we are still dithering between, having an under license agreement to manufacture or developing our own. Once there is a national effort which is, put into place, and we believe that it has to be done, I am very sure it will happen. The question is, can we put all the national effort all together? Can we have all the competent companies coming together and taking it forward? Well, that is the only issue to my mind. It can happen, it will happen. How fast it will happen is the question. And this cannot be done away with. You cannot have a, a country with all its aircrafts dependent upon engines coming from outside. Your heart is lying outside. So this is, I tend to agree with the importance of this. The way forward would be a national project of this nature. And if that is taken up, I am very sure within a very short time, we'll be able to find the work done in this country.
Yeah, self-reliance in core defense technology, is an issue in itself. Perhaps we'll talk about it in detail later. But sir, now coming back to startups, what exactly, I would like to know what exactly SIDM is doing for startups. And I don't see, their startups representation in per se in SIDM itself. And startups, though they have a fair contribution given limitations, fund crunch. And most of these startups, like I have interviewed them, I have talked to them. Some of them have come on my podcast also. There are really serious issues about funding because venture capital VC funding are drying up, and that's not a phenomena restricted to India. World over, we are seeing the funding to startups are not coming up. How do you see about it? And have you put or has the SIDM put it thoughts on paper how to navigate this whole issue?
So, firstly, I think the first part of your, I would say, observation needs a bit of a correction. We have already brought on board a startup, I would say, startup leader as member of our committee, which is the executive committee of SIDM. We have Vrenda Kapoor there, and she is just joined and confirmed. And she'll be leading one of our sub committees, which will be dealing only with startups. So first part, this is the first action I had taken the moment I took over as the president. I discussed along with my DG and I said, we need to focus on startups and we need to see what we can do with it. Bringing a person on committee itself does not mean that we have done a lot, but we have a lot in pipeline for that. Now, what are the basic issues which come with the startup? Now, I'm sure you have spoken to them. I have also spoken to them, a number of them. I support about 6 startups already in various manners, and I'll just give you my views on the subject. When does a startup come up? A startup will be really there when it feels that in a reasonable amount of time, it can see light at the end of the tunnel. End of the tunnel light means whatever his idea is, he can convert it into revenue into a time frame which is of his thinking, which may be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Thereafter, he spends his own money. He does not have too much of money, looks at some grants, and tries to go through this process. Initial success is always very good, but then you all end up in what we call the valley of death, which is a time from where the idea has been proven, but taking it to manufacturing is becoming a huge challenge because the funding requirements are totally different, is the time when they need support, both financially and otherwise, to take them through the valley of death. Once they cross that valley of death, again, it is a good runway for them to take off. Now, just to give you an example, with a very little commitment in IDEX by the government of India, we were able to ignite the minds of maybe about 1,000 startups in the country. Now, what was the scheme? Scheme was that you bring 1.5 CR from your side, we give you 1.5 CR of grant, you have an idea, you convert that idea, and you will get an order placed, assured order at a suitable time to take you forward. Now, all this does have challenges because the money which is there runs out very quickly. The funds which come from the government are subject to various checks and balances and do take time. So even that assured funding does take a lot of time to come in. And that is the time when the financial stress starts to come. And to imagine that a startup who is actually a startup can raise more capital either from bank or from anybody else is a very, very difficult thing because you really have no assets on ground. So that is the time when you start looking at some VC funding or some kind of funding to help you sail through. Now, these are the problems which we have identified, both in terms of funding and in timeline. So there are two sets of actions, and SIDM is working very closely with the Secretary DP. In fact, there were a number of meetings which have been held. We are looking at a funding mechanism, either based partially with the government, at a very concessional funding to ensure that these startups are able to get through this challenging time. This is a work in progress. You asked me what is the target. This is one of our targets to have this streamlined maybe in next 8 to 10 months. It could be a alternate investment fund type two, or it could be a on the lines of SIDB. It could be online. I cannot say what lines it will shape, but government is very alive. We have raised this point, and we have probably been tasked to start working on it. And we are probably hoping that within about a year's time, we're able to come out with something. The second part is that every project of a startup cannot be finished in the small amount of 3 crores which you give. So you need to go for higher value, and those need more funding. So then the IDEX Prime came where the funding went up to 10 crores. Now the government is even looking at a much bigger funding of 50 crores with a matching grant. There is a proposal in the works, and we are hoping where the startup may come along with the anchor industry to ensure that they are able to develop the technology and also industrialize the product as they go forward into the future. So these are some of the actions which are going on. The pain points are well known. The struggle is well known, and we need to find a time. And last would be that we need to shorten the time frame for development to actual placement of order. Because that's the time the funding is already dried out, and his possibility to sustain himself beyond that project may not be there at all. And hence we need to ensure that the production orders are placed very quickly, immediately after development is complete.
So what you're saying, sir, should be music to the ears of startup. Another, I think, question on what must be occupying everybody's mind. We are a few days away from the interim budget. What is the industry expectation from this year's budget, though it is an interim budget?
Every industry would like more capital spend. They will like, the funding for the products to be increased, because a very large amount of our capital budget currently goes into what we call is contractual liabilities, which means the previous orders. So you are paying that. So the money actual remaining for new procurement is very, very small. So everybody will look for, if you increase the budget, everything comes to the new acquisition. The second issue which I think I would like to flag is that we need to find a mechanism to bring R&D incentive. There was a time some years ago, R&D spend used to get an incentive in income tax, by virtue of which you get either a weightage of 150% or 200% on a spend. And you ended up at 200%, you almost saved 30% of your expenditure. So if you had spent 100 crores, you were actually spending 70 because you had saved some tax. I think these kind of benefits to encourage private industry to spend more and more on research and development could only be the wish thing. But again, expecting this in a, and interim budget, I'm not sure. But this would be one of the thought process. Of course, there's been a talk about performance-linked incentive for exports for defense, like many other industries. Now, the wish list could be very long, but let's keep it for the full budget.
But Defense Secretary seemed to be more optimistic, sir. Couple of weeks back, in an interview to a television channel, he said that he expects some between 5 to 7% jump in the defense budget outlay. So fair enough. We'll leave at that, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
But 5 to 7% budget will not really be very exciting for many people. Your inflation rate is 4 to 5%. People are looking for higher jump into the defense budget.
Yeah, but the last time also the outlay was not encouraging as well.
So that's why. So our wishing is always same. We look forward to more capital, acquisitions. Simple reason is that we need to get out of that contractual liabilities issue. We need more money in the hands of the acquisition wing to place major orders.
And so, now I'll get into, I'll try to have you on. Many people, within the industry and the government, they believe now is the time for defense policy reform 2.0. What you think about it? Because certainly, the on bidding, the whole process needs to be tightened up. If we can, quicken the process in emergency procurements, why can that be a norm for all kinds of procurement?
You have touched the nerve which hurts the most. Take a look. Any country which has, a longish acquisition cycle has two disadvantages. One is that it discourages investment and actual real application by the industry to move in and start investing. So investment gets slower. If I know my project is not going to see the light of the day for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, I would not invest today. The second part, which is more critical, is that today technology developments are making in some segments 5 years time frame obsolescence for the technology which has been developed in the past. So the key moving forward point would be how can we cut down the acquisition cycle and bring it down to a manageable frame, maybe 24 months outset. Why it should be 5 6 years? And we have an
Absolutely.
example. In emergency procurement, we were doing it in within the year.
That's what precisely my question was. Yeah.
So I totally agree. I couldn't have agreed more with you. But we are pushing this. There are a number of presentations done by us, number of times we have raised this issue. I am sure this is the elephant in the room, and people need to find out how to, tackle this. So I am sure we'll continue to put this as part of our agenda to reduce the acquisition cycle, because either if emergency procurement, we could carry out the trials in few months' time, also qualify, and it is possible. Secondly, we got to start thinking maybe de novo. You need to start thinking whether you need everything sequentially or whether you need to do parallel. Do you need to do everything before acquisition, or do you need to leave some of the things for post manufacture? Also, how do we handle the quality aspects, whether we are taking a look at third party inspections, whether you're looking at self certification. Self certification is one big way. If your companies are today, when we supply all good Indian companies who are in defense, are large manufacturers. All these companies are supplying outside to the world, and critical items, all of them are going under self certification. If I can give a component which goes into Rolls-Royce engine and goes under self-certification, I'm sure I can be trusted for giving a equipment which will meet all the QA requirements of the government of India. So we need to start looking at things. This is one of the things I think 2.0 should bring out. How can we reduce the acquisition cycle, and how can we make the, I won't say that we are not at fault. Everybody has some role to play. Even industry probably delays the trials. But once you are aware that if you delay, you are out, you will start, be far more responsive. Today, when you ask for RFP to be submitted after 12 weeks, invariably there will be 2 rounds of extensions, making 3 months, 6 months. Then when you go for trials, there will be another set of extension. But if there is a policy which says that all this has to finish in this time, otherwise people are out, everybody will start gearing up for that. If I know that the train is not going to be late and is going to leave the platform, I'll ensure I am there in time. And that is the kind of thing which needs to be done. And cutting out the cycle, and you rightly put that point on EP, I think this will be the way forward.
But is the government listening? That's my question then.
Yes, government is listening. Government is alive to it. How long will it take to do it? It may be, there'll be a lot of issues there. It's not just the government alone, bureaucracy. It cannot be alone the armed forces. I think everybody needs to get together and do it. And that's all I can say. I can't say more than that on this particular subject.
So the conversation has been enlightening, but we all are bound by time cap. So one last question before I think we'll have to wind up. I wish we could continue. is that how is the global community now looking at India's military industrial capacity and capability?
There's a sea change in the way people look at Indian industry now. Some years ago, it was a totally different thing that you are nowhere there in that global landscape. Today, we are able to get into international competitions and win. And it's not purely on price, it's also on performance. So there is a change. I'll just give you one example. India signed a agreement with United States on ISET, initiatives on critical and emerging technology. I attended a meeting with the UK industry, and honestly, they were feeling left out. They said, why is that we haven't signed the ISET with India? And you have the UK IBC coming up in full form. So the whole world is looking at us. The whole world is looking to engage us. And our industry are a very vital cog in that engagement. I can assure you, we are being looked at a totally different spectrum. No longer we are being looked at, we can do nothing kind of thing. In fact, the feeling is now setting in that it's time to join hands with India. Otherwise, India will do it on its own.
Yeah. On that positive note, thanks, Mr. Bhatia, for engaging us with such a fruitful discussion, sharing insight into the growing military ecosystem, its challenges, exports, and road ahead. Hope to see you again with more exciting topics and industry achievement.
Thank you so much, Dalip. Thank you so much, BL team. It was my pleasure.